Welcome to your
The White
Liberation Library.
Republic, Race, Religion, and American Nationalism.
And today, Ishmael Wade here with
Welcome back to your Liberation Library with Carl McCroy, and once again, glad to have him back. Friend, mentor, professor, Dr. Andy Lampkin, bioethicist, theologian, all kinds of accolades, but just a good, thoughtful guy who inspires my library. So I said, come on to your Liberation Library and tell me what's in your library.
Thank you so much, Carl, for having me back. I was so impressed by our last discussion. Although it's been many years, we've seen each other face to face, but it was just like we were in that room years ago, having discussions about taking courses and the like. So what's in my library? Sabbath as a Resistance is one of the books that's
Awesome.
I keep extremely close to me as a Seventh-day Adventist minister, as a Sabbath keeper. This volume drew me in, and if I took a little time, and your viewers wouldn't be able to see it well, but there are many highlights in red and highlights in yellow in this text, and it grabs me, and it's worth a discussion. One of the things I'll say about this text to help get the discussion going. For me, Sabbath as Resistance and Brueggemann's work really helped me to see the significance and the importance of the Sabbath beyond just a day of work stoppage, as he talks about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It helped push me out of that just simply day of rest notion to the Sabbath being significance, to be sure, for our relationship with our Creator, but also the Sabbath as significant for our relationship with our neighbor, our fellow human being. He talks about neighborliness, and it just grabbed me. So it expanded my view of what the Sabbath is all about, and I look forward to engaging you further on some other things.
Yeah. So there were a few things in there that struck me. One is, he's the Sabbath as in contrast to what was going on in Egypt with the Hebrews. All right. So they're definitely not experiencing any kind of Sabbath. All right. They're being worked, and there's a nonstop thing. But one of the things that he brought out that I didn't think I didn't give mind to before was, it wasn't just that those who were being worked weren't getting any rest, but their taskmasters weren't getting any rest. Pharaoh himself wasn't getting any rest through this system. Would you, man, unpack that?
I love the language. It's funny that actually grabbed me. That was what you just described, that the taskmasters aren't getting any rest. Pharaoh himself is not getting any rest, and to be sure, the slaves or the laborers aren't getting any rest. And so he
How is it that Pharaoh or the taskmasters aren't getting rest? What's it's obvious to us that the laborers aren't resting.
when you're stuck in this mode of continuous production, that's what he's getting at. You're stuck in this mode of continuous production. You got to produce more. Well, everyone's caught up into that system, and he makes the point. So, hey, Pharaoh's not resting. To be sure, he's staying on the taskmaster. The taskmasters aren't resting. They're whipping the backs of the slaves, so to speak, to keep the production going. So, in many ways, the system actually enslaves them all, clearly at very different levels. And so the tension is the God of rest or the God of the pharaohs. The God of pharaohs say work, 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 work. There's no rest for the weary. You got to keep working. You must produce. And this is interesting because I think in many ways he's talking to us in our society. He's raising the Sabbath, in the title of his book, The Sabbath as Resistance. Another way of getting at that, to say the Sabbath in many ways is countercultural. Our culture tells us to produce, to produce, but not just produce, but to consume. And this is what the media at work, we're told to produce. The media tells us to consume.
And this cycle of production and consumption is not, I mean, what's wrong with production and consumption? Throw it out there as a question instead of making a statement here.
Oh, sure. It doesn't, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with production and consumption. We are commanded in many ways to be fruitful and multiply. And it's not just related to our offspring, but to be fruitful, to be productive. We can go back to Genesis 1 and 2, Adam and Eve. They're given the garden and they're supposed to cultivate it. They're supposed to work it. We're supposed to be productive. We're supposed to produce, and consumption is a necessary outgrowth of our productivity. That makes sense. But when it's
right, and they're told to eat,
yeah.
just like they're told to be productive, they're told to eat. They're told to enjoy the fruit that's readily available, right?
They're told to rest. See, right. They're told to rest. Okay. They're told to rest, and I think that's exactly right. So, yeah, I think it's when we take it to the extreme that it becomes problematic. That we never stop. And again, both in our society and definitely in Egyptian society under Pharaoh's command, and he uses this language. He said, "Hey, the pyramid actually captures what's going on. It's the people at the bottom of the pyramid that's doing all the work, that's engaging in all the labors. Their lives are at risk. Their resources are stripped from them, and then the wealth goes right to the top of the pyramid in many ways. And there's something problematic about that, where you don't stop to take, those natural breaks and those healthy breaks for your own well-being and for the flourishing of community. And we'll get to that part of the discussion, rest being for the community as well.
Now, this might be somewhat related to that, maybe not. But one of the things that I liked, and I mean, it resonated with me because, I mean, I had already heard it many times that, you break one law, you break them all, right? I think that's in the book of James, right?
Okay.
So yeah, if you break one commandment, you're guilty of breaking the whole law. One of the things that Brueggemann does in his book is at the beginning and at the end of the book, he talks about it in the beginning, the Sabbath, relating to the first commandment, the first of the 10 commandments. And then at the end, he's the Sabbath as related to the last commandment. What's the first commandment? is about having false gods, having no other gods. And the last commandment is about coveting. And so he says the Sabbath helps safeguard us from the breaking of these two other commandments. So the first one, it goes back to your point of the cycle of production and consumption. So it may not be apparent on the surface, but the production and consumption becomes an idol. All right, so we're doing it not because we need it, not just because of the virtue, but we're like, this is our value system now. There's some inherent value in it, and we got to keep working at it. So how does the Sabbath serve as resistance against the forming idols? And of course, he's not talking about a golden calf, right?
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I know that's right. No, your analysis is spot on, and again, the first commandment and really the first three commandments is they have to do with our relationship with God, and the very first no other idols. And again, if you take production and consumption to an extreme, it actually can become an idol, a god, small g, that just becomes your focus. And again, when you go back to the Exodus story, which a lot of the Sabbath in Brueggemann's work is built on,
Yes.
You know, Moses goes to Pharaoh, let my people go, so they can go out in the desert and worship God. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that, to go out and worship God. And Brueggemann helps us to understand that, because the way the system is working, you just got to work. There's no rest. You basically work yourself to exhaustion and perhaps even death. And there's something problematic about that. It could be idolatry. And then, I mean, that gets at the first commandment. That's not what human beings were made for. We should be engaged in production. We should be engaged in consumption, but we're also made to worship God. We're also made to live in communities and be supportive of one another. And then this takes us to 5 through 10, with focusing on the 10th commandment, and not coveting your neighbor's possession. You know, we read it from the King James Version. Anything that your neighbor has, basically his wife, his family, his house, the land he owns, the animals he owns, etc. And you can extend that out further to any of your neighbor's possessions. What Brueggemann helps us to understand is that when we covet our neighbor's possessions, that is, we find ourselves, and I think he's spot on, in competition with our neighbors. And in competition, when taken to an extreme, like when work and production take it to extreme, can be problematic, because we reduce our neighbor not to our neighbor, so to speak, but he or she, it's caught up in this idea of production and consumption and having things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about having things. It's not about the possession, but it's the neighbor, being one's neighbor, being in community with one and the like. So, yeah, it can produce unhealthy competition, which is problematic, because you begin to want what your neighbor has. And again, we get back to that point that God created the earth and there was plenty for us all. But then some have a way of amasking all the wealth, and some have so much, and then there are others who have so little or nothing at all. And that's
Mhm.
what he's warning us against, getting to that point. And believe it or not, it's really, really easy. It's very easy to get there, actually.
And then, he's talking about the dehumanization that happens in the process of this. So as we and the first and the last commandments kind of reflecting on each other and complementing each other, or the disobedience of them feeding into each other. So when we're coveting what our neighbor has, then we're making gods of stuff. And so the stuff is our master, and we make our neighbors commodities, we make ourselves commodities. People are a means of getting stuff, rather than our stuff being, something that accentuates our being. And so what he brings out is funny thing is that, okay, what's the big deal about, or maybe it wasn't him. I actually came across this in the Bible Project, one of their videos, where it said, why does God have such a big problem with us worshiping other images? And they said it's because God has created us in his image. We are his image bearers. And so when we're worshiping other images, we dehumanize ourselves, and who are the true image bearers of God. We're dehumanizing and we're defacing the ones that actually. So he says that we're commodities now, and we don't even realize that we're making each other into commodities through the coveting and the idolatry. It kind of takes us back to Coates. We did a segment on Coates, right? Where he's talking about the body
Yes, yes, yes.
being
The
fuel
body,
for the machinery.
yeah, being used as a means of production. No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, in many ways, jumped into some deep theological waters here, Pastor. I mean, just sorting these things out. But that's what Brueggemann wants us to do, to jump into the deep theological waters. And in many ways, again, the Sabbath is countercultural. It should be used as a critique of culture. And you're right. We see in human beings as a commodity. And I think we have to be very, very, very careful when we use notions, and in ethics we use this language all the time: human dignity and human worth and human value. We feel that these are inherent to being human beings, but we value in society certain people over other people.
Mm-hmm.
I just hate to go down the road of calling these things, but we sometimes give too much attention to the long resumes, and even and I've been involved in this, building great CVs to create opportunities. But again, we use it ourselves as commodities to give us access to good employment, to give us access to nice communities, to give us access to nice things. And that's what he's critiquing here. Now, he's not suggesting that we should go and live monastic lives. No, but I think he is saying that we should keep those kind of things in check. And more importantly, not just for ourselves, but we shouldn't value our neighbors based on those certain kinds of accomplishments that you and I and your listeners and your viewers may be striving for. I think it's a serious critique of not commodifying ourselves as human beings, because our value and our worth and our dignity is inherent in us being, as you so eloquently stated, as being children of God, or being created in God's image, and God breathing that breath of life into our bodies. But again, as Coates talks about, we often use these bodies as means of production, as means of labor for resources, and he's critiquing that a little bit, not a little bit, a lot.
And so I think it's interesting that, all right, in Creation Week, Brueggemann is mainly focusing on Exodus and the Exodus story, and that's awesome. He touches a little bit on creation,
Sure.
but I want to just point real quick back to the fact that in creation, day 6, yes, Adam and Eve are created, and we see that God has the job description before he actually creates them, right? He has a conversation and says, all right, let's create man in our image, and we're going to have them multiply, we're going to have them take care of the earth and so forth,
Yes.
right? But after he creates them, and he already has a to-do list for them, right? He's got a job description for Adam and Eve before they come into being. But their first day is rest, not work. They have a job description, but he said, no, I don't want you to jump into that yet. I want your first priority is to, as it's been said, be a human being instead of a human doing.
I like that. Yeah. So your first day, commune with me a little bit. That's what God is saying. Commune with me a little bit, and commune with each other a little bit. Listen,
Mm-hmm.
there's plenty time for work. You got 6 days to do that. That's coming
Right.
soon, but hey, you need to build that relationship with me. Let's spend some time together, and you need to spend a little time with Eve, and we all need to spend that time together. I think that's one of the profound messages of creation that's often missed, and I think. Of course, for those who attend our religious services, we Sabbath, we go to church on Sabbath. That fellowship piece is absolutely critical. I learned that. I mean, we know this intellectually, we know this intuitively, but I learned this in a very practical way with COVID, when we had to shut down our churches, right?
Yeah.
And then I find myself missing the hugs, right, that we get at church,
Right.
missing the dap that we get at church. And so that communion, that fellowship with one another on the Sabbath is essential to us actually being human. So I think it's a lot there. Our fellowship with God and our fellowship with each other is an essential piece of Sabbath rest. And I like that. It really grounds and conditions in many ways what the rest of our week should be like. It sets the example.
Absolutely. And the talk about the commodity part, or the people as things that are used in order to get more things that we value more than people. It's I want to tie this Sabbath talk as relates to that to another one of our beliefs, or well, another focus of scripture for us as Adventists is in Revelation chapter 18, and we're going to see that as kind of a similar thing at work as it was in Egypt with Pharaoh. And so I'm going to skip down to verse 11, but the setting is that God's saying, come out of these systems. He said, I have some systems that are at work here. I have a corrupt religion that's intertwined with governments of the earth, and intertwined with materialistic commerce of the earth. And he said, listen, the earth, I'm going to read it. Let me just go ahead and read Revelation 18, verses 11 and following. Yeah, that's the right spot. That's the right spot. Okay. The merchants of the world will weep and mourn for her, for there is no one left to buy their goods. She bought great quantities of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple dye, silk, scarlet cloth, every kind of perfumed wood, ivory goods, objects made of expensive wood, bronze, iron, and marble. She also bought cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, olive oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves. Yes, she even traded in human lives. So God is again critiquing in the last days that the value system would prevail in this world that diminishes human beings to commodities. And not just that they are commodities, but once we start seeing human beings as commodities, they fall to the bottom of the list. Mm-hmm. So like, it's like you take any package in your pantry and look at the ingredients, right? At the top of the list is the stuff that is most important. It's what you have the most quantity of, and it's what's most valued in that list. And as you get down to the end of the list, that's the most insignificant stuff in the ingredient list. And that's what we have here. We have a descending order of importance going on in this list until the last thing is people. And God says, I want you to come out of that in the last days. And so we have Sabbath as resistance to a world system. It completely overshadows anything that Egypt was doing to the Hebrews, right? It's worldwide. So he says, I want you to come out of her. And it would seem to me that there's a link between what Brueggemann is talking about and what God's calling for in Revelation 18.
I think that's absolutely right. And Brueggemann has another text, delivered out of empire. I don't know if you're familiar with that word, delivered out of empire. I went to my Kindle just so I can give you the right title. Actually, I didn't want to destroy the title, so I wanted you to have delivered out of empire. And it's interesting. He makes the exact point that you just so eloquently made. And I think that's absolutely right. When we don't take this larger view of the Sabbath, linking Sabbath with creation, linking Sabbath with God, linking Sabbath with rest, linking Sabbath with idolatry, and we don't see how when we don't Sabbath, we make commodities of ourselves. I think we will get to that point that you just reflected on, where other things begin to matter more than humans. Again, the reverse pyramid, where humans ought to matter the most. In God's eye, humans matter the most. And for many in society, some societies, it appears that things matter more than human beings. In fact, when you think about systems of slavery and systems of oppression and systems of exploitation, what's actually going on is that human beings are made to be things, or at least treated like things. You can't make human beings things, but you can treat them like things. And that's something particularly problematic. And I think Revelation, you're absolutely right. It's calling us out of all of that and reminding us of God's original plan and what that's going to look like. And in the end, and we talked about this a little bit when we discussed Coates' book, although Coates was not overtly religious, although I think there's some religious themes in his work. He's critical of those, what he calls the mysteries. He's talking about religion. I don't know if it's a trivialization, but he says the mysteries. He's critical of that, particularly those otherworldly wings. I like to remind people that Jesus said that the Bible says that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. God is concerned with us, in community. And then when you read the Bible carefully and you engage Revelation carefully, many of us are looking towards heaven, but I always say, don't forget about the new earth. Because we got to come back and get it right. We got to come back and do it again. So that tells us that God is interested, and God's concern is us living in community and getting it right. So no, reject the ways of the world that says to you and me, you need to produce more, you need to be more, you need to be better, you need more education. And I'm not anti-intellectual, you know that. I'm not anti-education, but you need more education because you need to advance. You need to get more positions. You may not need all of those things. Be faithful to what God is calling you to do, and respect and learn to respect the humanity in each of us. Because what I learned, the more we get away from our community and the more we get away from people and we lean towards ideas and bigger and more prestigious in greater places, so to speak, I hope I'm being clear, we sometimes forget those things that matter the most, and that's everyday, ordinary people. That's who God is concerned with. When you reflect on, again, Jesus' life, and to be absolutely sure, Jesus's ministry, he was concerned with everyday, regular folk. That's who we should be concerned with. Everyday, regular folk. So we shouldn't get so fancy that we can't communicate or be in community or engage everyday, regular folk. We need to resist and reject the commodification of people and only seeing the value of people in what they can produce or what they can offer us. I've gone on a little long, but I think that's what the critique is all about, because I think that's what we are in society. We commodify people, and we do it in so many subtle ways. Concrete example again, and we all love the great athletes who can do more and seem to be superhuman. Here it is. We all love what I have a friend, he used this language, the super pastors. I won't call any names because I'll leave some off, but those super pastors that run the circuit, and we love to watch them on TV. We are all struck by what they contribute and what they offer us, and then we kind of turn away from the great vast majority of us all, ordinary folk. That's that subtle devaluation of human beings. The super one really matters. The super athlete, the super pastor, the super lawyer, the dream team. That's what matters more. But most of us don't fit in that category. And we want to get there. And we really should, be here where everyone is. And again, you know me well enough to know that I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't reach for excellence. I believe in Black excellence. I believe in excellence. We should constantly strive for excellence. That's not what I'm getting at. But I'm just saying we have to be careful and reflect a little bit what might be lost. That's what Brueggemann is sharing with us, because God intends the well-being of creation, all of creation, and he wants us to ever be reminded of that real people matter and that they're not commodities. They are our neighbors.
I love it. I love it. And so, listen, again, Walter Brueggemann's book, The Sabbath as Resistance. It gives you a lot of different facets to Sabbath keeping that that you might not normally think of. It will definitely make you think of it. You know, a lot of the arguments that we have about the Sabbath, about whether it's legalistic and whether it's really required by Christians and all that kind of stuff, all of those kind of things are really irrelevant to the argument that he's making in it. It's really irrelevant to Sabbath keeping itself, asking if this is something that we have to do. No, this is something that when you understand it right, you want it.
Yes, it's something we have to do. You should want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, so the only thing as we wrap up that I would say to Brueggemann, who said that we need to learn a lot from the Hebrews, is which day the Sabbath is. You know, so he's got an awesome exposition of the Sabbath, and I mean, my only critique of his work there is, hey, why are you doing it on Sunday instead of but other than that, I mean, this is a masterful job. It really did give me a new appreciation, a new perspective on Sabbath as an enjoyment.
It indeed is a masterful work. I'm really glad we had this conversation, this discussion. This was good for me, and us reflecting just on the significance and the importance of the Sabbath. Yeah, you're right. You know, I think for many of us, and there's a lot of discussion and debate about the day. And that discussion needs to be had, and we have to have that discussion. But what he was attempting to do is really help us understand the meaning of the Sabbath, and perhaps even the lost significance of the Sabbath as we get caught up in some other important debates. So I thank him for Sabbath as Resistance. This is a good read. I commend it to your viewers, to be sure. And his other work, Delivered Out of Empire, Brueggemann's other work, Delivered Out of Empire. Let's put it on the reading list and have that discussion. I think it'd be well worth our time. This has been fun, Carl. This has been fun. Thank you for your leadership.
My pleasure. Thank you. And look forward to having you again on your Liberation Library. And we want to ask all of you, what's in your library?